All right, Sid Bala, VP Go-to-Market, RelationalAI. We got the podcast episode number 2, and we talked about CIOs on acid last time, so back by popular demand. We're going to get into all sorts of awesome stuff. Thank you, Sid, for joining us, and on behalf of the audience, I'm going to thank you, once again, because everyone's really looking forward to this one. So thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Alec.
All right, let's kick it off. Open-ended question. Here we go. So within the context of financial services and enterprise AI, what are kind of the 2 or 3 things that you feel like financial services leaders should really understand and dig into around knowledge graphs and the implications of knowledge graphs in relation to enterprise AI transformation within finance?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So, last time you and I met, we talked a little bit about this, and one of the primary drivers for me to come and join Relational AI is, as I was sitting inside the enterprise, I started to realize that knowledge graphs are quickly becoming a standard element of the modern data stack. In fact, that's something I believe so strongly in that, I think it's something that enables the architecture. So whether you're a technology executive or an AI executive or a data executive or even a business executive looking to transform your business, it's really worthwhile to start to educate yourself about what a knowledge graph is and what it can do for your business. So, I really look at it as a technology as well as a business enabler. And the reason for that is pretty simple, because as we've seen from our consumer experience of AI, when we use AI, we're used to interacting with it by asking it questions, or now in the world of agents, asking AI to go off and do tasks for us. And what we're discovering as we go through that process is the interaction with AI is increasingly looks, feels, sounds, and smells like a human. So it's just like talking to a human. So in a world where you want to talk to a human, you want that AI to also be able to understand the context of your business as a human would. So imagine you've got an intern coming and joining you for the summer, and you're explaining what your business is all about. You're going to explain your business in terms of business concepts. You're not going to go ask them to do SQL queries against a database.
No.
You're going to explain to them, for example, one of the things I like to always experience with new interns is if someone's used to financial jargon like stocks and bonds, they show up on Wall Street and now they're talking about debt and equity. So there's a whole jargon, and there's terminology, there's concepts, and not only are those concepts important, but how they interact with each other is important. So to use a very basic example, you've got customers that have accounts, and accounts have transactions, and accounts have balances, and that's how you would explain to a human. So what I see is that when you bring AI into the enterprise now, and you're asking it to go and look at your data, it's really hard to bubble up that contextual information, and that's where knowledge graphs fit right in, because what you're doing with a knowledge graph is you're explaining conceptually the nature of your business in relation to your data, and that makes it a lot more valuable when you start to introduce AI tools, AI agents, AI capabilities to be able to work against that conceptual map of your business versus the actual way in which that data is stored.
That's a fantastic answer. Let's go a little bit further, if you would. So could you give an example of the way a data set might be a little bit less useful without the knowledge graph structure and data modeling and the implications of that transition? So maybe an example within the context of finance where the knowledge graph unleashes and unlocks an opportunity to interface with it in a way that's transformational and very different than the way that you might be able to interact with that data in the absence of a knowledge graph.
Yeah, that's a good question. So pretty much I'll give you an example that I think is quite relevant, but every single large enterprise that I've been a part of, stretching all the way back to the 90s, grappled with a way to solve this notion of a customer 360. What is a customer 360? When you're a large enterprise, let's say a bank, you've got many different business units, many different products and services, and they're all dealing with customers. And pretty soon you realize that the same customers are using your services in many different ways through many different entry points. What we've grown up with in enterprises over the last 20 or 30 years is this application-centric model of how technology is rolled out. And what happens with an application-centric model is you build an application for a particular business unit, or you build an application for a particular business function, let's say HR or accounting or finance. And each one of those applications has their associated data that's stored in the database. So now you've got a proliferation of applications and databases all over your enterprise, and they've all got their own versions of what it means to interact with a customer, specific to that specific application's functionality. So now you've got customer data sprayed all over your enterprise. And what typically happens with data is data does not like to behave. And so now you've got data in different formats, in different data structures with different tags, and invariably what you see is data corruption. So now you've got another job of reconciling all your data and cleaning up your data, and that keeps data organizations in business pretty much, is cleaning up data, finding out where data came from, where it's going to, how it pipes through the organization. And there's essentially what used to be colloquially called data janitors that would just clean up all this stuff that was being proliferated throughout the enterprise. So when you think of that current state of where we are, it's really helpful to be able to have a conceptual view of what something means. So rather than going into all these different databases and trying to collate what a customer means, what if you could have a conceptual way of representing what a customer was and an underlying way to map that concept of a customer to all your different data sources? And that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about knowledge graphs, is the ability to map concepts and their relationships to other concepts in your enterprise, which, as you can imagine, is a very useful way for AI to now interact with your data, as well as humans in the future.
Without a doubt, and I know that relational AI as a native Snowflake application, that relationship brings a tremendous amount of value to what you're describing, in that helping financial services organizations get their data effectively AI ready, and then therefore the things that you can do with it, which get into predictive and prescriptive analytics and all sorts of exciting stuff. So I wonder if you might want to speak a little bit to that relationship between getting your data AI ready and the implications of the joint value proposition between Snowflake and relational AI, because I know folks would love to hear about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great place to go from our previous conversation, is along with enterprises' data strategies, to the extent that enterprises have chosen Snowflake as a way to store their data, what we're seeing is a lot of the work that's been done over the last 5 to 10 years in terms of data strategy. So how do enterprises get holistic views of their data? How does data flow from place to place? The whole movement around data lakes and data clouds, especially, so data stored in the cloud, unlocking the value of data sharing. So as enterprises have made those data journeys, those have typically shown up as investments into Snowflake, and that's one of the reasons that I was at Snowflake Summit recently and talked to many customers and prospects and other folks in the ecosystem. And what became clear to me is that if you've already made an investment into Snowflake as your data cloud, what better way to unlock that value than to have a knowledge graph be able to go across that data and present that data to you for your AI tools and capabilities. Now, relational AI, obviously, we've got AI in our name, so part of what my job is also explaining where the AI is. And what I'm really excited about is our architecture that allows us to have reasoners of different kinds, whether it's a SQL reasoner that goes against your Snowflake data, or prescriptive or predictive reasoners. That's where a lot of the intellectual capital that we have at RelationalAI is really coming to bear, because now you're bringing additional AI capabilities into your ecosystem, whether it's Snowflake or the knowledge graph that you've built using RelationalAI.
Yeah, and I love that you called out this summit. I was there with you, and that was a heck of an experience. And I agree with you, wholeheartedly that it is incredible to think of what can happen when your data becomes AI ready, and then you introduce, as you said, some of those reasoners. And I wonder, sometimes CDOs and CIOs, they've got some blind spots, for various reasons when it comes to introducing, AI at scale, enterprise AI. And I think one of the things that you've taught me that I really appreciate in looking back at some of the patterns in the cloud migration and the trends within that process that unfolded, and some of the key lessons that can be embraced go forward when it comes to enterprise AI and embracing it. And I wonder if you might want to unpack that a little bit about some of the pattern recognition between what you've seen and been through within the enterprise, that you're taking forward with you here and today and go forward when it comes to enterprise AI.
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours. There's definitely some lessons learned. When it comes to financial services, one of the things that's important to think about is, where do we sit inside of a regulated environment? There's a lot of regulation around how we store, manage, collect, and distribute data. And as we're rolling out, AI, a lot of those same concerns come to bear. And in fact, what we're seeing with our customers is the extent to which they're maturing their governance processes. So taking the existing investments that they've made into data governance, extending that out to support AI, but then a lot of other concerns around AI governance as well. So those are manifesting themselves as implementations and standards and policies. And so I think definitely lessons learned from cloud, because what really helped roll out cloud strategies was understanding what the governance structures were like, what our controls were going to be, and how we could effectively demonstrate that the controls were designed and operating effectively. And I think those same lessons apply to AI. Can you make pragmatic choices about how you're going to design your controls around data as well as the usage of AI? So I think a lot of enterprises are concerned about how AI gets access to data, how it uses the data, where the data is stored, where it goes, in order to extract that value. So you want the value of AI, but you also want to have control of your data. And I think we're still in early days. I highly recommend watching or subscribing to news on this particular topic, because I think it'll be a pointer as to how widespread and how quickly enterprises can adopt AI. But the other thing I'll also say relative to what we're doing with relational AI and Snowflake, which I think is kind of cool, is because we're built on the Snowflake ecosystem now, the data lives inside of the Snowflake ecosystem. So there's already controls that enterprises have built or evaluated or assessed or implemented relative to their data and how it lives in Snowflake. And because relational AI is built into the Snowflake ecosystem, now any enterprise that are looking to adopt us or our platform or our technology can borrow and inherit all those controls that they've already got, right? So whether it's data access, data entitlements, or identity and access management, a lot of those kinds of controls that typically would be concerns in the regulatory framework now become a little bit easier in terms of that adoption curve to get to the value of what you want to get.
Perfect. One of the things that you and I have spoken about, and we actually, I think, touched on it in our last, kind of fireside chat, was this, obviously the speed with which things are changing in enterprise AI can make it quite difficult to stand up a pilot or a POC, that, let's say 4 months later, the world might have changed dramatically. I wonder if you could unpack a little bit of your thinking around, how do organizations avoid, quote unquote, doing AI for AI's sake, but instead introducing AI in a way that has more scale, is more sustainable, and avoid some of those traps of doing something technologically innovative for technology's sake versus maybe something with a little bit more longer term perspective and strategic alignment?
Yeah, I've talked about this before, and I think the key in my mind is always focusing on the commercials and the commercial outcomes and how you can transform your business to have better commercial outcomes, to compete better, to move faster in those ways that AI can help you do that, transform your business, obviously. But I'll give you a couple of concrete examples, and these are things I saw, months, sometimes years ago, that I'm seeing manifest themselves now. So, for example, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, when I would have cybersecurity vendors come and talk to me, I was just amazed at how many of them would pitch me dashboards. And 2 years ago, a dashboard was a good idea. And we grew up with this notion that the more I know, the better off I am, right? And I think that philosophy led to a lot of proliferation of dashboards and vendors who would try to show you every single thing that was going on in your enterprise. So imagine you're the mayor of New York City, and you're getting information about every little stalled vehicle and every rat and every bodega that's closed down. And imagine that level of information. Do you really need that to be an effective mayor? Probably not, right? And so I started to see dashboards as a burden because inevitably when dashboards showed up, that meant I needed teams to monitor the dashboards. So it meant staffing up, it meant skilling up, it meant a lot of operational toil for whatever value I might get from that much data. So I started challenging my vendor partners to do more of filtering out and giving me what I needed to be an effective operator versus telling me all the things that possibly I might want to know about what was going on in my organization. But at that time, I also foresaw that in the future, you would not need dashboards. And we're starting to see some of that show up now within application experiences and UX experiences where if I can tell AI to go find the data I need and I can ask for what I need in real time, do I actually need a dashboard? Do I need to be able to do essentially what are SQL queries and filter data and sort data and see all this different information that I probably don't need? Or can I just ask a question when it's top of mind for me? So let's say Log4j happened today. If I could ask a question that said, go find me all the apps that are using Log4j of this version and tell me about it, that's a lot more useful to me than having to go and look at some dashboard that has millions of data points. So I think we're going to see that trend definitely start to propagate where we get trained as consumers of user experiences to not have pre-built user experiences, but rather be very interactive and ask for the data we need in real time. Right now, I'm seeing that happen. Stretch that further, and what you're seeing, and I think Eric Schmidt talked about it this past week with Peter Diamandis, but I've been seeing this as well, is the inevitable disappearance of user interfaces and user experiences. So, if you can talk to AI on your device, do you really need apps that have menus and drop downs? And I think he called it the WIMP interface. So Windows interactions, menus, and pull downs, right? Do we need that? We probably don't. So a lot of those things are changing. So think of these shifts in how humans interact with computers. And last time you and I spoke, I mentioned that AI is learning to talk human, whereas we used to be in a paradigm where we had to learn how to talk tech. Right? That's really powerful, and I think that that's going to change how things manifest themselves in terms of AI. So what does that mean? Is you'll be surprised how many times I'm in meetings these days and I hear the word longer term. And to me, longer term is really a tough thing to digest because how can you know longer term in the world that we live in now? You have to plan. Your frameworks have to adapt to real time because if you look back two weeks ago or a month ago, none of us could have predicted what's happening right now. There's a lot that we can't predict. So it's really hard to plan. So just like we used to tell students that you go to universities to learn how to learn, not about the actual subject matter that you're taught, I think we're in an enterprise situation now where we have to learn how to learn. And how quickly can we learn? How quickly can we adapt? I think it's also going to generate new frameworks for how we do business and how we do work because it's not about pre-built recipes anymore. It's about thinking on the fly. It's about adapting on the fly. It's building on the fly. It's shipping on the fly. So I'm actually really excited about that because I think we generate a lot more value in a shorter amount of time. Case in point being Cursor as a company and how quickly Cursor grew and built market share. Those kinds of things are signals to me because they indicate the scope of the possible and the kinds of things that we can start to explore inside of our enterprises as well.
Wow, thank you for that. There are a number of different follow-on questions I could ask. I really appreciate the way you just unpacked both the opportunity that we're all now, faced with, where the machines and the computers and the systems have learned our language, so we don't have to learn theirs. So, fantastic, and I couldn't agree with you more. I do want to probe a little bit deeper because I think this is really powerful stuff about helping organizations learn faster and moved faster in that regard, and not thinking so much about that traditional, maybe top-down, long-term, strategy. Unpack that a little bit more, Sid, about what you think the implications of that are, and how that leans directly into what you just shared around enterprise AI, data strategy, knowledge graphs, and kind of. I'm sure a lot of folks are going to say, "Oh, wow, intuitively that makes sense. So therefore, what do I do? How do I shift? How do I embrace that?"
Yeah, so I'm going to start talking about something that I know very little about, which I love to disclaim that because.
Please do. I love that. Go.
Yeah. Many years ago, I came across this concept called a null, and it's spelled KNOL. And a KNOL was a unit of knowledge, right? And if you think about within enterprises or within organizations, how many units of knowledge exist, for those who are watching and are curious, there's a great article out there. I think it's called Old Men and Old Boilers. And Old Men and Old Boilers is a story about this guy who's living in an apartment and the boiler goes out. And it's a very old boiler. And the only person who can fix it is an old man, because nobody knows how to fix those boilers anymore, right? So that's a kind of a unit of knowledge that doesn't exist. But think about anybody who's in an enterprise knows that all enterprises have those units of knowledge. And typically, we had to kind of navigate our way through enterprise to find out who knew what. And I'd love to see an enterprise now with these kinds of capabilities where we can start to feed these units of knowledge into a repository that will never forget it, that can always have it, right? So when we were talking about learning and the ability to learn now, imagine how effective we'll be if we can accelerate apprenticeship, if we can accelerate internship, if we can accelerate the kinds of things that we can do. There's a lot of wringing of hands about junior level jobs and skills and things like that. But frankly, who wants to cut and paste cells in Excel anymore? Like, who wants to write formulas? Who wants to check hundreds of pages of a pitch deck of PowerPoint? Who wants to make sure that the fonts are aligned and the font sizes are correct? And I've literally seen meetings and people staying late at night, sending emails back and forth, from analyst to VP to MD and back down the chain, arguing about font sizes, right? Who wants to do that? So I'll be more than happy if those jobs go away, in the sense that I want humans to be more effective. I want humans to be more fulfilled. I want humans to be more happy. There's a line in the 1999 film Office Space that says humans were not meant to sit in little cubicles and stare at computer screens all day. And that was more than 25 years ago, and it's still true. Like, we should really be thinking about all the tedious, dirty jobs that none of us ever enjoyed, and celebrate that we live in an age now where we can anticipate not having to do those kinds of things anymore.
I love it. Also, what I really appreciate, Sid, you do this in conversations that we have, obviously not those that are recorded like this, where you introduce ideas and insights and you reference an article, a concept, a book, and what have you, which I really appreciate, because we'll make sure that as part of the distribution of this episode, we'll add links to these various topics that we've discussed. So, being cognizant of time, and I want to be respectful of your time, one or two questions left. When you think about the chair or chairs that you have sat in within the financial services, ecosystem, how do you think about those roles that you've played and how to help those folks think about practically moving forward at a certain clip that's consistent with, I know how you feel about how fast things are moving, and to be more specific, how do we pick up the pace without introducing risk that's not necessarily understood? And so how do you balance that healthy tension of moving faster, learning faster, but simultaneously not introducing risk that is the kind of risk that the financial services community clearly does not really want in their organization?
Yeah, I used to hear when I was a kid that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And you can see this very frequently in organizations where you've got a lot of people on a team working really hard with the best of intentions, but not able to get the outcomes that they want. I came across this research paper recently that gave ants and humans the same job of taking a T-shaped piece, a puzzle piece, and moving it through a maze, right? And there were certain circumstances in which the ants did better. So the ants were able to navigate the maze better. And think about it, there's multiple ants holding this T-shaped object, trying to navigate through a maze, right? And they know how to do it. And humans who can communicate are worse at this task. But there are certain circumstances in which humans are better. So I think, that's something that's worth thinking about is as we work together as humans, how can we work better together? And going back to your question about the seats that I've sat in, there's a lot of things that we spent a lot of time on that I think I'm really excited about us not having to do anymore. So I grew up in engineering, so wrote a lot of code. I've used code assist capabilities in VS Code, using GitHub Copilot, using Cursor, and so on. And I think if you're an engineer, you should love that stuff, right? Because we used to have to go look this stuff up, and we would cut and paste code, and you don't have to cut and paste code. It's there in the development environment for you. But there's a lot of things that make programming more joyful. So this goes back to the joy thing I was talking about earlier, right? Testing. Testing, I know so many engineers who found testing to be a chore and an afterthought. Even though if they had written tests, their lives would have been easier. It's the kind of thing where you stub your toe on a rock every day and you curse the rock, but you'll still go out every day and stub your toe. And so testing, writing code, we used to do code reviews. So we'd have to kind of pause development, send it off to another human, have them look over the code, come back. I think code review. So as you just looking at the development life cycle, there's a whole bunch of different touch points within which having an AI helper could just make that process a lot more fun. Engineers really want to solve problems and figure things out. You don't want to have to write the same function that's been written 100 times before. You want to be creative. So, if you look at engineering and how it can be more creative with the help of AI, and if you're a creative person and a problem solver, a person who wants to make things better, I think great, use all the tools you can get. But now you take that engineering life cycle and think about all the different processes that we have. So I spoke about this on LinkedIn recently about strategy, right? I've been amazed at the kinds of help you can get for strategy, the ability to be able to zoom out to get competitive insights. Strategy, engineering, management, and communications. I think teams can work better together. The more knowledge you can share, the more knowledge you can unlock. Not having to go and tap somebody on the shoulder or knock on someone's door to ask a question to be able to get that information. There's lots of ways that I think we should be proactively thinking about ways in which we can make our lives better and the tools that can help us do that. And this does not have to be done top down. It can be done at any level in the organization. And I think generally when we work in these environments, we kind of know what the level of risk is that we should be taking on. And if something adds more value, it's worth exploring as long as you understand the constructs within which you're operating.
That's a perfect answer, Sid. I appreciate so much you spending the time to unpack that amongst all the other things that you unpack. So thank you so much, and I hope that we can do this again, because I know that just in the notes alone on all the different topics that you mentioned, including Eric Schmidt's comments, which I was not aware of that. And I'm going to go dig in after this and learn what he was suggesting and walking us through, because there's a lot there. So thanks again as always, Sid, and good to see you, and looking forward to next time.
This has been fun. I don't know where the time went, but I loved it, and let's do this again.
100%. Thanks, Sid. We'll see you. Bye.